Hey everyone, how are you doing? So I'm going to be going over a presentation over a training on on support decision making. So if you give me just a second, um, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. There it is. Okay, wonderful. So in this presentation on support decision making, I want to go over some of the basic concepts of it. Why are we using support decision making? Why do we support it? What is substitute decision making? And the presentation that we put together. Now, this is one of our standalone grant activities. So I want to make sure that everyone has up-to-date, accurate information about what are the two concepts and how to accurately deliver this presentation so that we can wrap up this grant year with some success. So first and foremost, substitute decision making. When we talk about substitute decision making, we are talking about guardianship. And guardianship is a great thing for some individuals. Okay, I'll say that one more time. Guardianship is a great thing for some individuals. It is not for everyone. And I think that's something that families and advocates really struggle with, is knowing when is guardianship appropriate, when is it not. Just because your son or daughter has an intellectual disability or is on the spectrum, or maybe has a complex disability or complex medical needs, we hear from families in the field that, hey, they need guardianship quickly, but that's not always the case. We know that families or individuals with disabilities can make informed decisions with support. So that's the reason why we're going to be talking about and why we present on support decision making. And obviously, guardianship is important. So if you have any questions about guardianship options, Rich does a great presentation on wills, trusts, and guardianships that he would be happy to deliver in any other regions. So let's dig into some of the meat and the bones of the presentation. So first and foremost, this is kind of the intro slide of what are we going to be going over. So we're going to be looking at substitute decision making, what is support decision making, and how individuals can achieve support decision making. So just highlights of what that is. And the notes section have some good details inside of it. So at this point, I like to read out this definition in the notes section. So I might have my tablet open, or I might have this printed. So what is substitute decision making? And when I go to the slide, I'm typically going to say, okay, everyone, I'm going to read you a definition and then just go into it. So as defined by the Florida Department of Children and Families, substitute decision making gives guardians or advocates the right to make personal decisions on one's behalf. Okay. And then we go to the next slide. We don't try to define what those are. We just go to the next slide from here. So substitute decision making. Who's driving? Who's making those decisions? And it's important to recognize that more often than not, the guardian's going to be a family member or a court-appointed guardian. And I always like to say at this point, whoever that is, they're going to be an individual with the best interest of the individual with a disability in mind. And that's really important to state, because guardianship is a very sensitive issue. It's a very sensitive topic to talk about. So guardians do have the best interest of the person with a disability in mind, and we want to honor that. But again, it's not for everyone. So it's definitely, when I go over this presentation and I start here at the intro slide, I'll typically say, this is a very personal decision for your family. If anyone tries to stop you, tries to talk to you and say, during a live presentation, how do I decide if I need to become a guardian of my child? That's a personal decision for you and your family to decide. And you need to weigh the options. You should, do some research. And we'll be talking about what a guardian some of the things that guardian will do as a part of the substitute decision making. So who's driving? The family member, the court-appointed attorney. Next slide. What decisions can they make? So they can make healthcare decisions. They can decide whether or not you're going to have an operation. They can decide what doctor you go to, what treatment plans you're going to have. And again, it's someone that has your best interest at heart. But that's a big reality, is someone gets to decide your healthcare decision. Your living arrangements. So is the student going to live with mom, dad? Are they going to live with siblings? Are they going to live in a group home? They get to decide where you're going to be living. And then your finances. So if the individual with the disability is working, they get to decide what happens with that paycheck. They get to decide what happens with their benefits. If they have Social Security, or if they're on the waiver, the guardian gets to make those decisions as well. If they have a trust, the guardian gets to decide what happens with the money in the trust, as long as it complies with the trust that it's inside of. And all trusts have different stipulations and regulations and rules. And again, if you want a follow-up presentation to this, Rich or Nelson can give a presentation on special needs trusts, which is really helpful. So supported decision-making. Supported decision-making gives people with disabilities the help they need to make choices about their own lives. Again, I would read this out. And supported decision-making says, the vast majority of individuals with disabilities can lead fully independent lives, but some of them may need additional help to make those independent lives successful, and someone to bounce ideas back and forth on, and to advise them on certain topics. So when someone is talking about supported decision-making for the first time, they really need to start young, and they need to describe what is supported decision-making to the person with the disability, so that it becomes a concept that the person with the disability understands. It's more formalized, and they have that person to bounce ideas off of and get advice from. But it allows that person to get the help they need, but also make their own choices. So what is supported decision-making look like? Well, first and foremost, it's person-centered. So all the decisions are centered around not the guardian, because there is no guardian here. It's not centered around what the supporter wants. It's always centered around what the person with the disability wants. It provides support. The person with the disability leads the decision-making process. So the supporter really gets to, add that support, add that advice, give suggestions, but the person with the disability is really the one leading the decision-making process. And then all evidence, all research shows that it leads to a better quality of life. And we can point you to some research articles to that substantiate this. So what kinds of support can the supporter offer? They can offer financial advice, medical advice, employment, independent living, school, personal care. So financial advice. What kind of bank account should you open up? Do you need a special needs trust? What is a special needs trust? Medical advice. Does that person with a disability want the supporter to go into a doctor's appointment with them to help understand what's happening? Is the person with the disability do they want to become a DNR? Do not resuscitate? And do they know what that means? Is their medical treatment plan, do they know what that is? Who is going to become their medical healthcare surrogate if they are incapacitated and not able to make their own decisions? Is it the supporter? Is it someone else? Employment advice. So how are you going to disclose you have a disability for your employment? If you're on benefits, is the job you're taking going to disqualify you from benefits? Independent living options and advice. Independent living looks different for everyone, and independent living does not mean living alone necessarily. So helping that individual with a disability understand what are their options, what are they looking at? Are they going to live with mom, dad, brother, sister, uncle, tia, cousins, live by themselves, live in a group home? Really, that decision needs to be led and driven by the person with the disability, but with advice and guidance from the supporter. So, definitely those are really good conversations to have. School related advice, personal care advice. So I think this one's funny, and really down to earth and a real life example. So if you have so say I have a brother with an intellectual disability who wants to go the route of utilizing supported decision making and asks me, hey, can you be my supporter? And I give him advice on different things. And one of those areas is personal care. So say, he's growing out this crazy mustache or growing out this really scruffy long beard or not cutting his hair, not cutting his nails. Those are definitely things that I can help provide advice on. And hey, man, you really need to cut your hair or trim down your beard or cut your nails. If you want to get a job, if you want to be in a relationship, those types of things. And I think that can really bring it home of not everyone's going to think of that. And some people may, maybe they want to have long hair. There's lots of men with long hair, but maybe they just don't think about it. And those conversations are great ones to have. So how to choose who your supporter is. This one's a really good point to hover over and talk about with the audience. The person with the disability is the one that chooses who their supporter is going to be. That's really, really important. And that's why it's good to talk about this process early so that you're able to, the person with the disability is able to have these intelligent and these accurate conversations about who they want to be their supporter once they turn 18. And again, it does not have to be mom and dad. And if I was in their shoes, if I was going down this road, I probably wouldn't choose mom and dad. I might choose a sibling or a cousin, someone I trust, but someone I can also be open and honest to without feeling embarrassed or silly. Because some of the options, some of the things to talk about, like personal care, independent living, medical advice, those can be some touchy subjects. So make sure it's someone that the person with disability feels absolutely comfortable with, and that supporter is going to honor their role. So what is the role of the supporter? The role of the supporter is to give advice. So the person with the disability makes the final decision, period, end of question, done. Now, a couple things that the supporter can do is pros and cons sheet. So this might be a good activity to do while you're hosting this presentation in person, is to print up a pros and cons sheet and print out a couple scenarios and give it out to each of the tables at the presentation and have them role playing supporter, supportee. Another thing the supporter can do is role playing. So role playing examples of the apartment, looking for your first apartment, trying to open a bank account, job interviews, all those different things. But pros and cons sheets and role playings are a great way for the supporter to give advice, but ultimately help the individual with a disability make their own decision. Now, support decision making as it relates to schools. One of the big areas where this plays in is self-determination, communication skills, and post-school outcomes. So being able to incorporate support decision making and helping individuals with disabilities, not starting with their transition IEP, but really emphasizing during their transition IEP, speaking up, taking a leadership role in their IEP, really being able to develop those communication skills so that they can have these conversations with their supporter. And then looking at post-school outcomes. If we're not looking at our post-school outcomes, what are we doing? So we need to be able to have those goals and We need to be able to understand where the student wants to go after school so that those conversations with the supporter around school options, employment options, independent living options, that person with a disability already knows what it is that they're talking about and what they want their decisions. Now, support decision making at home. Let the student with the disability, let the individual with the disability have more of a speaking voice in medical decisions and medical needs. If they're on Ritalin or Adderall or Vyvanse or some sort of medicine for ADD, ADHD, and they're not liking it, let them vocalize that and see if there's some other options. If they want to try out, if they want to vocalize and say, hey, this medicine isn't making me feel good, I want to try something else, or, no, I don't want you to come into the doctor's appointment for a physical, but you can come in once the doctor is done with my physical. That's respecting their voice and letting them have a say once they become, older and are a part of that process. Meaningful activities. Meaningful activities at home are really focused around what is engaging to the individual with a disability. So this is not graduating from high school to mom and dad's couch. So finding activities, whether that's volunteering, whether that's working, really finding something that connects and is engaging to the individual with a disability. And then living arrangements. If the individual with a disability, once they are done with school and they want to live with friends in a stable scenario, or live with other family members besides mom and dad, maybe a brother or a sister or someone else, that's something we need to respect. And I think it's really key to explain that to participants. How can families help? You can help as a family member by starting early. Build goals into your IEP. Allow youth to make their own choices, and making your own choices can be as little as picking out your own outfit, deciding what you're going to have for dinner, to larger things of when are you going to do your homework, when are you going to study for tests, and seeing what some of those consequences are. And maybe the outfit, picking your favorite outfit that they like, maybe they see, hey, no one else is dressed like this at school, and I don't like that feeling. So I'm going to wear something that everyone else is wearing, or I love that I stand out and it's great. And so that's definitely something to look at and consider. Participate in life decisions. And I like this one a lot. So participate in life decisions, the way that I'm interpreting that is, when they start into their transition IEP, talk to them about the bills that you're paying. Talk to them about your mortgage, your rent. What do these things look like? You're at a restaurant, you're paying. Why do you have to tip? How much do you tip? What do those things look like? Talk to them about the bigger realities of life, because if you don't help, who's going to? If you don't help explain that, who will help explain that? And that's something that they need early on to make independent living a success and make those conversations with their supporter work. Now, how can youth take their voice back? So if youth are feeling as if they don't have a voice, like they've lost it along the way, they haven't been a part of supported decision making, it's really been substitute decision making, and they want to have more of a voice, attend your IEP meetings first and foremost. Give input on your doctor's appointment. Give input on post-school plans. What do you want to go to school? Do you want to go to trade school? Do you want to go to community college? Where are you going to live? What do you want to do with your life, and what are your interests? Because the interest of your mom, your dad, your guardian, they're not going to be your interests. And if you don't speak up, mom, dad, guardian, teachers, they're going to write in things into your IEP, or you all as parents, as educators, you're going to have to write something into the IEP if your child's not speaking up. So really encourage them to take a hold of of their interest, and they're vocalizing what that is. So that's really supported decision making in a very quick nutshell. Please, please, please comment on here with any further questions. And please feel free to reach out to your director with any questions about the presentation, about how to deliver it, and how to be successful. Thank you.